Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, Real Raw Uncut, where we review and look at books, articles, occasionally films and movies. So the reason why it's titled Real Raw Uncut is because everything here for the most part is highly unedited and taken in one shot. And the goal for this channel is that it serves as like a conversation. So for anything that we look at or review here, I want you guys to also look at and review and give me your thoughts and opinions as well. So whether you agree, you disagree, other things that you find interesting that I may have missed or didn't include, I want you guys to also give me your opinion. So it's just a dialogue and a conversational channel for all of us to enjoy. So I will go by the name Monroe on this channel. Now, the book we'll be looking at today for the first episode is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. And this book is written by Betty Smith. And so the main character of this book is Francie. So for this book, I've read the first 45 pages so far. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Okay. So Francie is the main character. Some other interesting characters to note are Neely, who is Francie's brother, Johnny, who is Francie's father, Keely, who is Francie's mother, Sissy, who is Keely's sister, and who happens to be Francie's auntie, and also another character that's not really talked about much so far in these first 45 pages, Floss Gladys. So essentially, if we're just talking about brief plot overview. So here Francie is a young girl who explores the world around her and her neighborhood. So whether that's collecting like trash items or exploring with her brother or trying to make sense around her, going to the library to read books and to try to really grasp the meaning of life as best as she can, and also interacting with people in her neighborhood. So I did take a few like brief notes, so I'll definitely be referencing these as I go. So some interesting themes that came up for these first 45 pages that I noted. So the first theme was childlike wonderment, idealism, hope for life, failed dreams, and dignity in hopeless places. So those were some interesting themes that really stood out to me as I was reading. And then some emotions that definitely came up, as I mentioned in my plot, was really seeing the world through Francie's eyes, seeing it through this childlike wonderment of trying to see really what is life about, how are people, to make sense of the meanings of things around her. Now, so we will go deeper. Okay, so some interesting things. So page 6 of the current version of the book I'm reading, they mentioned the tree of heaven. And so this tree grew out of boarded lots, but also failed to reach the sky. So I thought this was kind of like an interesting like juxtaposition to name something a tree of heaven, yet this tree fails to reach the sky, right? And when we think of heaven, we think of something that's limitlessly high up in the sky and something that's not reachable. But yet this tree that's named the tree of life can't seem to break that ceiling. So a few paragraphs down, they also mentioned that this tree liked poor people. And to me, this kind of served as some symbolism in the sense of that the tree is the tree of heaven. It's supposed to reach the sky, it's supposed to be limitless. Yet in this particular neighborhood where the tree grew, it liked poor people. And so I see this tree and how it was mentioned as a symbolism of hope. So maybe people in this neighborhood who are, for the most part, impoverished or struggling to make ends meet, trying to survive and live every day to the best of their abilities and trying to accrue some sense of wealth or happiness, but never quite fully reaching and attaining it. And so I thought that was an interesting juxtaposition. Something else that was interesting in these first 45 pages for me was Francie throwing out coffee. And so here they mentioned that, as they were eating, she, her mother, her brother, and her family members around the table, Francie liked the smell of coffee, but she likes to throw it out. And so her mother's sister essentially complains to her, who, Sissy in this case, tells Keely, that this is a waste. And Francie's mother, Keely in this case, defends Francie, her daughter, and says that it's good that people like them can waste so they feel what it's like to have in excess. And so I thought this was an interesting theme on like not having enough money, rationing, and making ends meet. And that this idea of wasting to some degree, whether or not you have, right, gives you this sense of feeling like, I have enough. That even if I discard some of what I have, I still have enough to get by. So I thought that was something interesting to note. And also here, another interesting part of the book that I took note of was that Francie and her brother collected items deemed as trash. So that could be like some rags, some paper, some metal rubber, and they traded it at a local store for candy and prize items. And so I almost take this as, just like childlike games and tomfoolery where you go about exploring things in the world around you. They also mention Francie going to the local library, attempting to read books in alphabetical order, essentially to understand the world around her. And I think that's pretty impressive ambition for a young child to do. And this really speaks to her curiosity. And so I think that this sense of childlike wonderment, as we grow older, we tend to lose it. And so really seeing this, it takes you back to that sense of full innocence as a child when you were trying to just comprehend the meaning of things. So another interesting character to note here is Johnny Nolan. So Johnny Nolan is Francie's father and is Keely's husband. So essentially the theme I've gotten so far around him is that he feels like he doesn't measure up in life to where he needs to be and feels like he hasn't really amounted to much. So just to quote something that Johnny Nolan says here is, he says, "I've got a couple of fine children home and a pretty wife, and I tell you, I'm not good enough for them." And so really the nuance of this is he feels inadequate and feels that he's not a good enough father and not a good enough husband. So just a few lines down, they also say he brings home wages but keeps tips for alcoholic drinks. And so essentially her father is an alcoholic, and he drinks because he's ashamed of the life that he has so far. He feels like he's not really accomplished much. So a lot of people like Johnny because essentially he's a friendly and amiable person to be around regardless. He mentions that he doesn't have an education beyond 6th grade and that a lot of his family members went uneducated. His family actually immigrated from Ireland, so he's Irish, and came to America essentially for better job opportunities. So his aspiration was to be a popular singer, but he doesn't know how he will accomplish that dream or how he could have even accomplished that dream without education or having connections to go to the next level. So he drinks as a coping mechanism to deal with his unsteady life, failed aspirations, and responsibilities that he feels like he cannot shoulder properly. Hence why we also see that whatever wages he works, he just gives his wife because he trusts that his wife is more stable enough to handle the responsibilities and bills. Okay, so something to note here is that he talks about how even if he passes away, he won't be remembered for much, right? So really, it brings to mind this idea of how does one want to be remembered in the world, right? So what impact do you want to leave behind once you've lived life and hopefully accomplished what you wanted to accomplish? And for him, he thinks that people would just chalk his life up to him being a drunkard. So that's essentially a bulk of what this chapter has gone over so far. We also have another character who's not mentioned much in these first 45 pages. She's mentioned in chapter 4. Her name is called Floss Gladys. She supports her mother and her father by working at a kid glove factory. All right. So there were some interesting words here, or words that I thought were neatly used that I would like to say. So the first word is inveigle, which means to persuade someone to do something by means of flattery or deception. Stupendous, which means extremely impressive. Indignant, which is feeling anger or annoyance at what is perceived as unfair treatment. Placidly, which means in a calm or peaceful manner. To begrudge, it means to envy typically someone for their possession and enjoyment of something. And premonition is a strong feeling that something usually unpleasant is about to happen. So some synonyms for this word are like a forewarning or a foreshadowing of something. Okay, so that concludes my review and thoughts of the first 45 pages of the book, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. If you're reading this book along with me, give me your thoughts, your opinions, your analysis, any interesting themes that you want to mention that I didn't mention of these first 45 pages. What was interesting to you? What scenes and passages evoked emotions? And what are your overall impressions? And essentially, to sum it up for me, I'll just end it by saying that this book is an interesting exploration of childhood, of life, of dreams, of aspirations, goals you want to achieve. And I think that as young children, we have many aspirations, we have goals. The sky is the limit. And for the most part, some people's dreams get crushed, unfortunately, by adults. And sometimes life crushes those dreams for you. And other times, children just keep on to that hope. So my question to all of you is, in life, as you're growing older, how are you still maintaining your childlike wonderment if you're on the older side and you're reading this book as well? So something to think about. If you've lost your childlike wonderment, how can you cultivate that so you can still have a sense of curiosity about the world, which can allow you to learn something new? All right. So thank you so much for tuning in today with me. Again, the book is A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. Have a wonderful day and see you again for part 2 review of this book. We'll look at the next about 45 pages. I am Monroe. This is the Real Raw and Uncut YouTube channel. Thank you so much. Stay blessed. Peace.